Well, now we're at the point in the class where I'm asking you to develop your own assessment items rather than just evaluate the quality of existing items. So I am actually at this point for the project going to be providing you with some outcomes that are associated already with a particular sort of subject area. And I'm going to be asking you to add to those outcomes if you want to make them something that could fit better into your own classroom situation, or just keep the outcomes the way that they are. But I am asking you to address measuring skills by developing good assessment items that focus on an anti-racist topic. And you might be wondering, well, that sounds a little unusual. Why that? So I thought I would start this overview by just giving you a little bit of information about why I came up with the topic and a little bit about how I got the materials that you'll have as resources when you develop your assessment items. And then I'll just end it by just reminding you of what the overall scope of this particular project is. But I want to say just a few words about why I am picking the subject for you rather than you picking it for yourself. And that's because, honestly, it's going to be easier for me to evaluate your ability to develop good assessment items if you're all focusing on the same general set of outcomes. We have so many students in the class now that that's really important. So there's that. But more importantly, honestly, in the last couple of months, I've really been pushed to my tipping point about education and certainly about education in the state of Virginia. The people of Virginia elected a new governor recently, and one of the things that he did in his first day of office was to sign an executive order that was related to education. How great is that? We're finally getting some airtime. Unfortunately, it was a demoralizing and frankly an ignorant focus on an aspect of education. And if you're not that familiar, I'll just remind you that the very first executive order that Virginia's new governor signed was to eliminate from K-12 the teaching of inherently divisive concepts. Wow. Obviously not drafted by people who were that well versed in education to consider that you'd want to outlaw inherently divisive concepts, because certainly most areas of teaching and learning possess some elements of divisive concepts. But of course, it wasn't all divisive concepts that the executive order focused on. It was really a big one that some people erroneously term critical race theory. And I'll read you what the executive order states specifically in that area. Inherently divisive concepts like critical race theory and its progeny instruct students to only view life through the lens of race and presume that some students are consciously or unconsciously racist, sexist, or oppressive, and that other students are victims. First of all, it's completely false to say that critical race theory instructs students to only view life through the lens of race. Now, it's certainly of value to examine certain concepts through the lens of race, just like it is through the lens of gender, through the lens of being American versus somebody from a different part of the world. That's an important way of looking at it. But presuming that there's something that instructs students to only look at the world that way, that's just ignorant and wrong. And unfortunately, it's being used obviously for political reasons, but as educators, it's being used as a scare tactic. And one of the things that it's scaring educators away from, likely, is the idea that racism in any form is something that we shouldn't be talking about or touching right now. When the reality is, at least for me, I see racism as a tremendous ongoing problem in our culture. And there are so many things about racism that I wish that I had learned more about when I was in school. And one really big thing about addressing racism in school is the fact that as professional educators, we are charged with being responsive to what's going on in the real world outside school. We need to bring the real world into the classroom. We all know that. And we examine the world and what we think is important for our students to learn within the context of the real world. And unfortunately, racism has been a major problem, and to me, in front of my eyes, is becoming an even bigger problem in the real world now, right now. And so before I thought it was important as an educator to at least acknowledge racism. You know, I was raised during a time when the best thing you could do in terms of racism was to be colorblind. And honestly, that was the value that I grew up with. And I didn't realize until I got to be a real live grown-up person operating in the real world with lots of different kinds of people that blinded me to problems, to real problems. And in many ways, it may have contributed to me perpetuating sort of racist attitudes. I don't know, but I do know that we need to take those blinders off and see everybody for who and what they are in the world. And race is part of that, is part of everybody's identity. The problem is, in our country, some races are privileged over others in certain situations, and we're seeing that problem. And so understanding it, recognizing it, and most importantly, trying to figure out really, really useful ways to solve some of these problems, that's important. That's what we need to be learning about. And so just acknowledging racism isn't enough anymore. I firmly believe now, because I have reached my tipping point, I believe that I and you should not just acknowledge racism in the world as teachers, but we should also try to be anti-racist. We should start developing experiences for our students so that they could learn how to not be racist. Because they're learning how to be racist, and wherever they're learning it, and whoever's doing it, is doing a really good job. And we need to do a really good job of being anti-racist. And that requires the same kind of skill and care and energy and effort that it takes to help people learn lots of other important things. I'm shifting my focus. And for this particular project, I'm asking you to consider how you might take an anti-racist piece of context and content and work and see, at least for now, at least see how it can be integrated into just the everyday experiences of teaching social studies or math or English or language arts for that matter. You'll see it in this example. And hopefully it will inspire you, because it really inspired me. And in the process, you'll be exposed to a lot of anti-racist resources that you might find useful as teachers, and also other really good resources that don't have to do with racism, but do have to do with ways that you as an educator can do a good job of helping your students learn really important things. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to walk you through now my thinking about coming up with these resources and why I selected them for this project. And then I'm going to walk you through that, and then I'm going to just summarize briefly again the overall sort of aspects of this project for you. Okay, so here I wanted to just walk you through how I came up with the topic that we're going to be addressing for this project. First of all, I wanted to come up with an anti-racist topic that I thought might be something that could be beneficial to teachers in lots of different subject areas. And so I started my searching by going to one of my favorite websites called Edutopia. And it's one of my favorite professional development and professional learning websites developed by the George Lucas Education Foundation. And I did my search. I typed in anti-racism, and I got back some really interesting looking projects. But the first one really got my attention, A Guide to Equity and Anti-Racism for Educators. So I clicked on that one, and I was scrolling down, and I was reading about with some of the resources that they included, and there was a website that said Teaching Tolerance, and I thought, now that one looks like it might be very useful for me. And it took me to a website I'd never been to before called the Learning for Justice site. And this is a website that's developed by and supported by the Southern Poverty Law Center. And that's an organization that I have a lot of respect for. And they have a whole classroom resources area. So I went to that, and I clicked on lessons, and as I scrolled down, I decided that since I was a science teacher, I was just curious, well, what kind of lessons do they have that address topics related to science? And notice that you can select different grade levels, different social justice domains, but I just wanted to know with science and health. I thought that would be a good general topic. So I clicked on that, and I started to examine some of the different options, and I found this one called Analyzing Environmental Justice, and this is the one that really spoke to me. I looked at quite a few, but the reason why I like this one is, first of all, it speaks to a topic that, as I indicated on this website, is something that's very relevant for most communities and very relevant for Virginia, certainly. I liked how the learning objectives initially address things like using maps to locate anything. In this case, it's specific to environmental justice, but being able to use and apply maps is excellent. Reading graphs, reading data in graphs is very important. And so I thought that this could really help teachers be able to integrate a topic like this into their own practices. And another thing I really liked about it is that the materials that are included could be very useful in a number of different ways. There's something here about an air pollution map. So again, it's being able to read and interpret maps and data in there. And so this is a resource that you could use in a lot of different ways if you were an educator, and a resource you could use if you're assessing learning. And I also liked their list of the effects of pollution, who and why. And again, this is an activity that the students would be involved in. And I think it's a very valuable activity. Other graphs in another handout have to do with sort of exposure to pollution. In this case, it happens to be Massachusetts. And so there's resources like this that could be very useful in terms of writing assessment items for you as well. So the resources will certainly help you learn more about the topic. There's specific vocabulary that's defined. There's some procedures. And anyway, I think this is a great topic for us. You can add to it if you want to. You can do some searching on other related topics. You can add learning outcomes to the objectives that are listed if you wanted to include this in a specific content area or grade level. If you happen to teach grade levels that are in the primary grade, you're going to have to rethink your target population, because this is really probably only appropriate for middle school and higher. So that's going to be your emphasis for this particular project. So that was a little bit about how I came up with the sort of lesson topic and the focus and the resources that you're going to use to help you figure out the topic and then write assessment items. Now, I do want you to know that I don't expect you to be an expert on this particular topic, okay? So when I evaluate your work, I'm going to be examining how you developed the items themselves, the structure of the items themselves. And I'm going to be looking for ways in which the good assessment writing rules have been applied. So you are going to, the first thing you're going to do is look at the outcomes and then possibly add other outcomes that address the grade level and or subject area that you might integrate this topic into. And I've given you a few examples on this page of how I might have done that as a science teacher, because I think this topic would have been great in a science class. So the overall goal here is that you are going to be creating an assessment that will measure all the skills that are defined for the topic analyzing environmental justice. And there are going to be all the skills that I've indicated, as well as things that you might add. And you're going to be creating items, most of which are going to be selected response items. So, and I have a list of all of the specific item types that you need to include and how many you need to include. And a few small constructed response items are going to be included in your assessment as well. And hopefully you'll be able to look at the entire assessment that you make, and you could say, yes, if my students can perform well on this assessment, then I feel good about the fact that they have learned what I want them to learn about analyzing environmental justice. And students who can learn those skills will have one more sort of tool and one more sort of perspective that they possess in order to better understand the impact of policies that adversely affect certain members of the population in our country. And that is one step towards being an anti-racist person, because having empathy for people who are marginalized and who are discriminated against in some really important ways. You know, public health, that's huge. But being empathetic to that, first of all, being aware of it and being empathetic to that will hopefully lead to, if it's something that everybody in schools can learn more about, it will lead to more equitable policies in this world, and a world where people really are, where there is, things are a lot more fair and a lot more equitable, regardless of what you look like or where you came from. So hope you enjoy this project, and as always, let me know if you have any questions, comments, or concerns.